Welcome back, guys. What you're about to listen to is an episode of the Four Fires podcast that was recorded at the local area director retreat down in Gulf Shores, Alabama, back on February 16th or 18th, 2024. If you're wondering what a local area director is, that's a man who's volunteering his time to join in with the Four Fires nonprofit and help us build the army of four-dimensional men in the city that they live. If that sounds interesting to you and that you might want to join in on that team of local area directors, send me an email at info@four-fires.com. You can also find that email in the description. This episode, we're going to be talking about the professional fire, so I hope you enjoy it. Be sure to share it with someone you know, and remember to live intentionally.
Welcome to the Four Fires podcast, where we talk about winning in all four of the essential areas of life.
So, moving on, let's jump into the professional fire. So, what do you guys feel like your greatest professional fire discipline? Sean, I think you probably should take this one.
So, those who are familiar with the Four Fires, we do the assessments. Professional, I have been very blessed to have been successful and to again, but for the grace of God, there go I. I've been blessed to do.
Well, you are also very intentional. You put a lot of time into it, so you're not lucky.
Yeah,
you put a lot of time into it.
No, you had mentioned earlier that we as men tend to throw more logs on that fire than any other, and I'm certainly an example of that. I think the professional fire for me, and I am in construction, and has been the intentionality to be better. As a young engineer, I'd taken over a project in Pennsylvania. I was as green as greenhorn could be. And I show up on this project, and I had bumped into this old crusty contractor who proceeded to tell this young whippersnapper that he had been doing this for 50 years, and what did I know? And my mentor, I had relayed that conversation. We dealt with it, and I called my mentor, my boss at the time, and said, hey, this is what we're dealing with. And he said something to me that stuck with me. He goes, that old codger might have been doing it for 50 years, but all he did was repeat year one 50 times. And so just because he had been doing it for 50 years, he had never gotten better. And so for me in my professional fire, it was the growth of, okay, I've done year one, I'm on to year two. Let's grow, right? Let's get better. Let's get smarter about what we were doing, and let's learn about our profession. And, you and I were talking about earlier, you're in the SEO digital space, but you had mentioned there's so much to learn.
And it's always changing.
And it's all, well, that's business. We're in a modern time where the only constant is change.
Yeah, I've heard that.
You guys were kidding me about how old I was, and we were making the joke that the dinosaurs were still roaming the earth, when I was coming up. And so not quite true, but close. So that intentionality to get better. You had mentioned you had actually had a case that you had said that I wouldn't have been qualified to do this case if I had been doing this for 30 years. Right. The case was that complex and needed somebody with that much experience. The fact that you recognized that is a credit. The fact that you knew where you were in your professional journey, and that this might be a little bit above your expertise. And then you still developed an equitable solution for your client, and you got a result. And at the end of the day, you got it done. And I think that as you young men start their professional careers, and I know there's a lot of us old guys are saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or when are you going to get serious? Or forget that, right? Yeah. Look,
Rich.
So that I think that is, you'll figure it out when you figure it out, and not a moment before. And We have seen this. How many kids come through college, get a degree, and then they're doing a profession that has absolutely nothing to do with their degree. You know, expecting any 18, 19-year-old to figure it out and know what they want to be is completely unrealistic. You'll figure it out when you figure it out. And by and large of us, think about, we fall into our profession by happenstance. We knew somebody who knew somebody. My dad was an electrician. My brother was a plumber. My friend's dad worked in SEO and got me a job for the summer. So we tend to fall into those things, which is okay. But whatever you have fallen into, be deliberate about. Yeah. And don't repeat year one 50 times.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to add on this because you know, this might be useful for someone maybe in this sphere. Learn from my mistakes. One of my favorite things about the people in my life is almost all of them are pretty open about their mistakes, and you learn way more about life from mistakes than you do your successes. Right. But, you know, as we talked about last night, so I've recently gone out on my own. I came from big law in Atlanta. And one thing that came to the realization for me of why I did that, number one, ownership, which is ownership of my own life. What I was realizing, I know we talked earlier about there's just not enough time, but in the context of what I was doing at the time, I was out the door at 6, and I was back home at 7:45, 8 o'clock sometimes. And by that time, my son was going to bed. So, you know, it was not literally, but it was a high five, good night. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then he'd go to bed, get him down around 9, 10 o'clock. The point was that I didn't have time, literally didn't have time, unless I just didn't sleep, which usually didn't result in a favorable outcome. But I could not designate, however you want to call it, any time or effort or energy into my other purposes and my other fires. Yeah. Because I was so fixated on this job I hated, and it was affecting me on a physical level, number one. Didn't have time to get to the gym, or if it was extremely sporadic. Mm-hmm. Didn't have time to focus on my family because I was too busy needing to bill out for this big law firm for clients that didn't know who I was and never would know who I was. And, you know, the pay was okay, but it wasn't enough to, not that it ever is, but I was negating everything else in my life. And I had to make the decision of, was this going to be the rest of my life? My kids were barely going to know me. I was going to continue to get fatter and fatter and fatter. I was being pulled away from God because I'm too worried about dealing with what this partner was going to drop down on me today. Mm-hmm. So I took ownership of that and went out on my own. Absolute leap of faith, completely uncomfortable. Now, every day I find a new thing that I have no clue how to do, whether it's running payroll, whether it's, prepaying taxes, whether it's a new legal issue that you don't want to tell the person, I don't know. I've got it. I'm going to take care of you. Yeah. Okay. God wants me to take care of you. Mm-hmm. So it's just a cautionary tale. A lot of times I know we put all our logs into the professional fire, but just one thing I would caution everybody listening is, if you are, or you think you are, stuck in that situation where everything is fixated on that professional fire, just reconsider it. Think about what the alternatives are, what the other options are. Because being from my perspective, being the wealthiest lawyer, making great money, spending all my time in the office, was going to leave me unhappy, miserable, probably divorced. My kids don't like me. And most importantly, no relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And there was no trade-off, monetary or otherwise, that can make up the difference and make up the gap there.
Yeah. If you work on your professional fire only, you can make a really good living. But if you work on all 4 fires, you can make a life.
Exactly.
Yeah. One that's healthy and not dysfunctional, or at least less dysfunctional. None of us are going to be perfect, but I feel like my at this point in my life, like I'm 24, so I'm at the very beginning of my professional career, trying to even figure out what my craft is, and like we've talked about, like someone young like me, like I'm gonna spend the next several years and maybe more than that, the next decades, like really defining and honing in on what my craft is, like being able to be super confident in that. And so, but what I feel like right now, my greatest professional discipline is having a mentor. So any young people for sure out there listening, get a mentor just to be able to ask questions. And that requires, well, let me back up. Even if you're not young, like I know guys that are in their 60s who have mentors that are older than them. So, I mean, you can have a mentor until the day you die, I feel like. And that's, Alan and I recorded another podcast that talked about find a guide. So in every story, you're either a victim or a hero in your story. And then if you're going to choose to be the hero, it's important for you to find a guide. So if you look at any superhero movie or any comic book, like there's always 4 characters: a villain, a victim, a hero, and a guide. And so it's important to find that guide and get that professional mentor, and even a spiritual mentor in other areas. But for this topic of the professional fire, have someone who can coach you and that you can ask questions to. And with that, I just wrote down the word humility. I think also a really great professional discipline of mine is I'm not afraid to say, I have no idea what that means. Tell me more. Like I'll have conversations with either a mentor or just somebody will come by the office and they'll say something, and I'm like, what is that? I've never heard of that before. And I'll learn some, like you taught me B2B and B2C.
Correct. Yes.
In business and marketing talk. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what does that mean? I've never even heard of that. And so I learned something. And so I feel like the humility and just the growth mindset, wanting to learn, and I'm not afraid to tell someone, I don't know what that means. Can you tell me more? And I think that rather than me acting arrogant and acting like I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that means, and then actually never knowing, if I'm open to saying, hey, can you tell me more? People are absolutely happy to help you understand something. I feel like Sean, you say that your hobby is business. You love just the whole game of business. You just really enjoy it. So right. You would love to explain to me your favorite hobby.
Oh, absolutely.
If I have questions. So I think that's a really great discipline that I'm trying to make sure I exercise that discipline muscle of always asking good questions and being a sponge. Well, sometimes I think it's good to be a sponge and take in information, but then you also need to have a filter somewhere to where you don't do everything that people tell you. You got to be wise enough to have a filter to know what's good and what's bad. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the professional fire disciplines. You got anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'd say that one thing I've observed from people who are further along in their professional fire than I am, because I'm just getting started too, is they all have this commitment to learning you guys are talking about, which requires that humility, but they also all are problem solvers, and they don't just get faced with a problem and run away from it. They face it and they figure out how to solve the problem through whatever means they have available to them. And I think that's really important, to figure out how to do that and to start using that skill. And, there may not be any validity to that observation, but that's something that, I think that would be, huge for anyone to grow in. It's just not running away from the problems, but actually figuring out how to solve that.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a business owner, and if you're a young employee, an issue is developed or a problem is developed, at least making the attempt to solve, so that as you're coming to me and you're saying, hey, we've got this issue.
I've tried this already.
Right. Yeah. Or I'm thinking about trying this, or I think we can do X might solve this. That shows that you're thinking beyond the issue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That you're or at least attempting to solve. Now, that's a muscle. Mm-hmm. And, those of us who have been doing this a little while have exercised that muscle a lot longer than those who are just starting out. That's just time. But making the effort to attempt to solve is how you begin to exercise the muscle. And then experience comes in when they go, I understand that you're saying why we're going to do this, but let me explain what those consequences are. And then that's where the mentor can show you, hey, have you thought about those events that are going to occur that you might not have seen simply because you lack the experience? But as a business owner, what I appreciate is when people make that effort. Right or wrong, they're at least attempting to solve the solution. And then as you get better and you become more experienced in your craft, what you will find is you then are able to solve those issues, so that as you're talking to your employer or you're talking to your client, you're just like, this is what we've come into and this is what I've done to solve it. And then it's, oh, thank you. I appreciate the heads up. And now I don't have to worry about it because I know, as we said earlier, you got this. And that's really what we're looking for.
Oh,
We call those old age senior moments.
When you were talking, I thought about a conversation that I had one time just about in your professional fire, but then really in all four of the fires, taking an ownership mentality rather than call it an employee mentality, where it's like, oh, that's more than you pay me to do, like metaphorically speaking, like whatever fire you're talking about, it's like, oh, that's more than I get paid to do, so I'm not even going to consider thinking about that or trying to solve that problem. And so taking an ownership approach in your physical fire and with your relationships, with your relationship with God and professionally, I was just like, think like your line was, oh, I can tell you've thought deeper into this about how to solve this or how to win in this area.
Yeah.
And so I think that approach is super important in all four fires, but definitely in the professional fire. Like I am not gonna accumulate wealth unless I own that and go accumulate wealth and build wealth. I can't say, oh, well, I'm just not good in my professional fire because the president is crazy or the economy's bad. Like just taking the ownership of it, I think, is so big. We talked about last night. One of the core values for the four fires is ownership.
Yeah, it's trendy now. You know, you hear the term entrepreneur get thrown around a lot.
Professional, what do they call it? Professionally unemployed?
Yeah, professionally unemployed.
Yeah.
So as we say here at this table, two of us are business owners and two of us are employees.
Right.
I think if you're an employee, you can still be an entrepreneur.
Right.
And where your employer, and not all employers, but where you find a good employer, when you're an entrepreneur, you're an employee, but you're making the effort in your professional career to think like an owner, to think, how is this going to impact the business? What you're showing to your employer is, I'm being serious and deliberate about my position.
Right.
And so the rewards that come with that will show up. And so, because, and unfortunately it's the nature of the beast, when you get good at solving problems, we give you problems.
We have more problems to
Yes.
solve.
So it's unfortunate, but you don't give your worst employee the problem. Unfortunately, the worst employee gets to
Is the problem.
right? Gets to kind of slide, but then you become valuable, and you develop and hone those skills, and you work that muscle, and then as you hone that craft, you can then accumulate income and you can accumulate wealth because now you are a professional. You just didn't coast on year one knowledge 25 times.
Yeah. Alan made the comment last night, don't wish that life was easier, wish that you were better. So in that case, if I was your employee and I'm doing a really great job and then you hand me more problems or more tasks because you can trust me and you know that I'm the guy for the job, rather than me saying, well, I'm doing a good job, why are you making my life harder? It's, okay, I accept this challenge. How can I get better from these challenges? Like, it's just the growth mindset. Like, don't wish that life was easy, wish that you were better.
Well, and for young men starting out, your income is directly proportional to your level of responsibility, your ability to accept. You as an attorney have a tremendous amount of responsibility. You have fiduciary responsibility to your client. You're an officer of the court, so you have a duty to the court. There's a lot of pressure on any young attorney that comes with that. But as that responsibility, the compensation comes with it. And so as a young employee, you may not be making a lot of money today, but that's the way it's been for a very long time, and that's the history of the human race. Understand, though, as you develop those skills, you will become more valuable to either your current employer, a potential future employer, or, as those of us who are business owners here, crazy enough to hang our own shingle and say that we'll blaze our own path. And so young employees, learn your skills on somebody else's dime. Hone your craft. Be deliberate. Don't just show up at your job at 8, leave at 4, do the bare minimum, and keep your head down. That's great, but that works for today. But 5 years from now, you'll still be doing that same thing. Yep. And so to your point, Jeff, accept the challenge. And yes, it is a little bit of a left-handed back compliment to say, you did great on that problem. Now I'm giving you more problems to go solve.
Yeah.
But accept that that's what it really is, that there's a level of trust or there's a level of comfort from the business owner to you that says, I believe in your capabilities enough that I'm giving you this responsibility to go deal. Now, a good employer will recognize that. I realize that there are a lot of horrible employers that might not. But as you hone that skill on this individual's nickel and you achieve it, there is a better employer down the road that is willing to pay you what your skill has now achieved.
Yeah.
Have we ever thought about the concept of I get up and go to my job and I loathe it? How
Like
odd,
what to do in
odd that should be. So the reason I was thinking about this was my previous employer. You know, I woke up every day dreading going to work. But if you think about it, ideally our professional life is the one that we get up and we're excited to go do. And it wasn't until just recently, after I hung my own shingle and I've got 10 times the stress and 10 times the responsibilities, that I realized just how sad it would be if I was in a job where I'm doing the I can't come in today, sorry boss, just because I can't deal with it today. I think that goes a little, I don't know if it's just us as a society or mainly younger folks, this mindset of my job is supposed to be something that I loathe, rather than professionally, I want to be doing something I am excited to get up and go do every day. I almost think that gets lost on us as a society, especially younger kids, where it's all these crusty guys that make all the money, and I have to go pick up doo-doo in the backyard, metaphorically speaking. But I just think about that now that I have hung my own shingle, how excited I am to go to work. Yeah, there's parts you dread. Oh God, I gotta call them today. Oh no, I've got to deal with this. Oh God, this judge hates me. Whatever it is. But just how, and I didn't realize it until after I got to where I'm at right now, that 4 months ago, whatever it was like, I am so miserable.
That's your old job.
Yeah. But I mean, anybody in that mindset, if I am actively trying to find a way where I don't have to go into work today, I'm calling in sick because it is just that miserable. How juxtaposed that is to what I think we're actually called to do professionally. There is a component. Be uncomfortable. Yes. That's not what I'm talking about here. It is having a passion and a joy for what you do. In whatever context it is, it's got to be there. And if it isn't,
if you loathe it, change your situation.
That's the thing.
Like ownership.
So we'll go back to being uncomfortable. Go be uncomfortable doing something else that you are passionate about.
Right.
And if you make, you got to do it for minimum wage, but you love doing it, well, go figure out a way to take that minimum wage to 15 to 30 to 90 to infinite amounts of money. But whatever you're doing, if you are miserable, if the only purpose of your professional fire is so that you have enough money to keep the roof over the head and some food on the table, there's something noble about that, being a man and your duty to provide. But I think you're worth more than that, both financially and otherwise, to find something that you can keep the roof over the head, food on the table, also that you're passionate about, that you can build up and move forward and have the money to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
I think there's kind of two different aspects to that, because there are some people that are stuck in a job that they hate because the job genuinely is not a good job. But then also the culture kind of has made some of the younger generation, like my generation, like just hate work in general. Like they just have a lazy mindset, and no matter where they're at, they're going to complain. So not all people need to go quit and start a new job. Some people just need to kind of grow up.
Yeah.
And
well, you talked about
understand the work.
Yeah.
Like, that work is important.
Right.
But,
Tyler, last night you talked about like the thing that breaks your heart is or frustrates you is seeing a young person say like, oh, well, that's going to be hard. I don't want to do that. It's like, what?
Yeah,
like,
it's in everything. It is in everything. It is so easy to flip on the Xbox, play some Call of Duty, and ask mom to heat you up some pizza rolls. Yeah. Also, grow up.
Yeah.
Okay, like, just grow up.
It's easy to complain about your job but never change anything. And so it's like, it feels good to sit here with other people that are living in a victim mindset and complain about my job. Like, that just feels good, so it's comfortable. I'm going to stay there, rather than saying like, screw this, I'm not doing this job anymore. I'm going to go either find a job that pays more because I need more money at this time, or I'm going to go pursue a career in something that I'm actually going to enjoy.
And we talked about that last night. I know we keep going back to the legal profession, but in big law, the premise is I'm going to hire this young lawyer. I'm going to teach them to do the grunt work, but I'm not going to teach them or give them even the opportunity to go do what actually
makes the big bucks,
which is go generate clients and
that's what you're doing now.
Huh? Right. That's where I'm at now. Yeah. Whereas opposed to, here's your little cubicle, sit down, shut up, go bill 60. By the way, you only billed 60. Next week I want 70, since apparently 60 is too easy. And by the way, don't talk to the client either, because they may like you and then not want to, you go off on your own, and we've got to insulate you to. Yeah. But it's, it's the work was miserable. The environment was miserable, but thinking back on it, just in the time that I was there, which was, in hindsight's 2020, but why was I doing that? I know I needed to hone some skills, but the fact of the matter is, when I've got questions, I have legal mentors that I call and say, here's where I'm at, here's what I got, what do I do? Rather than the way that my previous employer and the whole environment in and of itself, which is, I'm going to insulate you. I'm going to give you little crumbs of information and pretend like there's this Wizard of Oz person behind the back curtain that you can't figure this out. You need me. You need us. You need this big shell of an organization in order to make you valuable. Yeah. It's not true. Yeah. And, finding something in the perfect world, you make a ton of money, you don't work a ton of hours, and you love what you do, right? Yeah, but also, the older you get, and like we talked about, the more you hone your skills, the more valuable you become, the more experience you have, you get to create that.
Right. Well, Sean, explain your 4 steps of trading time for money. Explain that.
So, how do we progress in life and business and earn income that we take home? And so when you, what a British friend of mine used to call their frou-frou job, right? Your first job is, you're a young person, you're 16 or 17, and you're going to go work at a fast food joint. Well, you're exchanging your time for money. You have no skills. You're 16 or 17. You haven't developed any yet. So you're exchanging time for money. You're answering the register and in the drive-thru and those kind of things. As you hone your professional skills, you then begin to exchange skill for money. So now you're working for an employer, you're college educated, you've got a degree, you've got a professional certificate, you're a semi-expert or an expert in whatever your chosen profession is, but you were working for somebody else and you were exchanging the value of those skills for a paycheck. The next step up is where you then begin to, you've jumped out, you've hung your own shingle, you've started your own business, and you begin to exchange other people's time or other people's skills for money. And then this is the case of the business owner employs 10 or 15 or 20 people. Those people work for him, and he makes value off of their fruit and their effort. And then last, which is where true wealth is created, is when your money is exchanged for money. You have enough, you've accumulated enough assets that those assets are generating revenue or generating income, and that money continues to occur whether you make an effort at it or not. The money itself is doing it. So those are the four phases or the four steps of wealth creation for you as a family unit, and understanding where you are in those four steps can allow you to decide where do you want to move. There are very successful people who have simply been employees their entire careers, but they were able to parlay the income from the exchanging of skills for money to accumulating assets that then started to do that. So you don't have to necessarily go steps 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a number of ways for that path to go, but ultimately for true wealth, you want to get to that last phase where the assets themselves are beginning to generate wealth or income independent of you or independent of your efforts.
Yeah. Right. You don't have to be a bodybuilder, but you should probably be mindful of your physical fire and eating good. And it's just like same thing in the professional fire. You don't have to be a business owner of a business that's $100 million a year. You can be an employee and build wealth. I read a book, Smart Couples Finish Rich by David Bach, and he talks about the myth of it, you have to make $1 million a year to be a millionaire. And it's like, no, like a very small amount of money invested over a long period of time can be a lot of wealth. And so it's just like we're all going to be in different, like everyone can't be a business owner.
Correct.
And so there's nothing wrong with being the best employee that you can be. I mean, I'm an employee, but I'm trying to be the best employee. I love being an employee at this point in my life. Maybe one day I'll have a business, but I think it's...
You feel passionate about what you do,
yes,
though, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, there is being a business owner has stresses, as you mentioned, having to figure out.
No. So you can't think of one.
No stresses at all. There are some personality types that's okay. The stress, for me, the stress is part of the job that I like. Yeah. I have clients that I just go, oh gosh, I don't want to talk to them today. But then I have clients that I look forward to talking to, and my team will tell you I'm horrible about this, but if I'm sitting in my office doing paperwork and a client calls and says, hey, I need you to come out to a project, I will completely disrupt my entire schedule, throw it all out the window to go hang out with a client on a project. That is the part of the job I truly enjoy. And so doing that, you've set yourself up to do this. You don't have to be a business owner. If you have that type of personality that you're okay with that constant change and being uncomfortable, then it's a great thing. If your personality type is being an employee and you want to clock out at 5 o'clock and go home and not worry about payroll on Friday, that's okay too. Understanding when we talk about building wealth isn't just money. Wealth is your physical. What's your health like? We could all be billionaires, but if we're pre-diabetic or diabetic, obese.
I'd rather be a poor guy who makes it to 60 than a rich guy that makes it to 30.
Yeah. And you can have relational wealth. Yeah, you can be wealthy in your marriage. Like if you
exactly.
Put a lot of time into your marriage, and there's wealth there.
Yeah. Oh, there's absolutely. So that when we talk about 4 fires, there's wealth in all 4 of those.
Yes.
I don't want to be the richest attorney in the cemetery. Right? Doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah.
Right?
He didn't make it to 45, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talk about building wealth and being intentional, you're building wealth, your physical fire, you're taking care of your health, your purpose fire, you're taking care of your relationship with God, you're taking care. You're a people fire. You're taking care of your family. You're taking care of your community. You are building wealth across the board. Being intentional about those 4 areas. I did want to push back a little bit. In professional, we get a lot of, find your passion and you'll never work a day in your life. I absolutely hate that saying.
Okay. Yep.
Here's why. 2 reasons. Let's say I want to be a singer, but I'm just horrible at singing. But singing is my passion. Yeah. It doesn't matter how much my passion is. Mm-hmm. Nobody, including my wife, wants to hear me sing, and she loves me. Yeah. So that says something about my ability to sing. So that might be my passion, but I am never going to make a profession of that.
Sure, and I think that's like your EQ, your emotional quotient, like introspection, being just being realistic with what so the professional fire is identifying your craft, the unique gifts and skills that God has given you, and then you work on those and you can make them better. But we all have unique gifts and skills. So if singing is not one of them, then just be realistic and say, I love singing, but I'm going to choose to only sing alone in my car. Yeah. I'm not going to go try to
grow up.
Yeah. Right. It's just I played 4 years of college baseball. I love baseball, but I knew that I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, but I did it to a certain point, and I got a college degree, but I had teammates who were, I was like, come on, man. You're not going to go play professional baseball. You probably ought to start thinking about what you're going to do with your life. Stop being so naive.
Right.
Enjoy it. Enjoy the sport. It's a cool time in your life, a cool season. But, so yeah.
Well, so the second part of that. So let's say you have a passion. You have a passion for the law, right? You really like the nuance of it. You're in it. You like the historical, and you're doing all of that. If that was your passion, and then you go be an attorney, and then the reality of the job hits, right? And so all of a sudden, your passion that you thoroughly enjoyed has now become a job. Mm-hmm. And all of the aspects, we all have jobs. There are aspects that we don't like. And so you've taken something you thoroughly enjoyed as a hobby, as a passion, and now you've just burdened it with the realities of it being a job. You have clients that you have to service. You have deadlines that you have to meet. So if you have a particular passion, and you might be very good at that passion, be very careful before you make that decision to turn that passion into employment. Mm-hmm. Because, and we see this all the time, young business owners jump out. Most business owners start careers are technicians. They work for somebody else, and they go, I can do it better than this idiot, right? Why am I working for this idiot? So what am I going to do? I'm going to go be a business owner, and they jump out. But then all of a sudden, as you had mentioned earlier, we have HR compliance, we have contract law, we have litigation, we have hiring, we have sales, we have marketing. All of those aspects that you didn't have to do when you were doing this as a hobby on the weekend are now part of the job.
Yeah, it's that iceberg fallacy where you see the little tip on the top of the water and you don't see the...
Well, then that kind of makes me think about our conversation last night about maybe you get to a certain point in your professional life where you have some money, then you think about buying a business rather than starting a business, and that kind of a whole nother topic that we talked about last night. But
and that's
what percentage fail? What was that? 96% of businesses.
Yeah, like 4% of businesses actually make it to $1 million a year.
Yeah, don't quote me because I'm pulling this from memory, but it's. I want to say 95% of businesses don't make it to year 5, or 90% of businesses don't make it to year 5. Mm-hmm. Of the 10% that remain, like 90% of those don't make it to year 10. 90 some odd percent of businesses never crack $1 million in revenue.
Total or annual?
Annual.
Okay.
Yeah. And so most small businesses in America are, in essence, a glorified job. It's a technician who thought, I can do it better than this idiot. Mm-hmm. And he got out and he hung his own shingle and he went into work for himself. and then never was able to actually grow the business and turn it into a business. It's simply just he's or her has swapped one job for another. Now, and it may be a well-compensated job, and nothing wrong with that, but they went into the situation blind. And so to the point where if you're a young person and you're working at a company, you can be the entrepreneur within that company. You can accept that responsibility. You can take on those challenges. And you get a moment to discover what are your unique talents. What are those things that you can hone as a craft? And we all have those. We have things that we're better at than our coworker sitting next to us. You're the guy that, the IT guy that everybody comes to fix the printer because you just understand, you know.
I need one of those.
You know,
I really need one of those.
Yeah, and or you're the person that you have an upset client and everybody turns to you and goes, "Hey, can you talk to this person on the phone there?" And you just have that ability
the intermediary.
Yeah, exactly. So we all have those talents. The trick is to figure out what are your talents and how can you then begin to use those and hone those talents to create wealth. And wealth is not just money, but can create a better lifestyle and a better life for you and those folks that you've chosen to bring into your life, your spouse, your children, etc.
Right. So the second question, when I think about the professional fire, I think we already mentioned it earlier, but I truly believe everything is God's. And so when I think about my professional fire, developing my skills, and then being adequately compensated for those skills, it's all from God. And so all the money that God blesses me with, I'm called to be a steward of that and be a good manager of it. So the next question is, what's more important, your income level or your spending habits? And maybe it's a little bit of both, but I just wanted to start talking specifically more about kind of like what you do with it.
Are we talking
with the cash
as a personal income versus spending?
Let's talk about personally.
Personal. So income versus spending in personal. What's the most important? Spending. It is too easy in our current society to let your spending via credit cards or other means quickly outstrip your ability to comfortably manage that debt. And as we were talking earlier, the borrower is slave to the lender.
Right.
On a personal level, when you are deep in debt, you are, and it's a derogatory term, called a wage slave. You are working for an income that you're servicing debt to give to somebody else. That somebody else, by the way, has an asset. That asset is the loan that they loaned you. They are allowing their money to work for money. And you are the dummy that's working for them to service that debt simply so that you could get the latest Xbox or the latest Apple Watch or iPhone. Right. So getting caught up into consumerism in our society today, it is just way too easy to get out beyond your skis. At a personal level.
Earlier, you made a comment that I was like, that's an interesting way to think about it. I mentioned that something I learned in college was that interest is the price you pay for impatience. And then you made the comment that, so financing something and then paying interest, thinking about the interest that you're paying on the $60,000 that you borrowed to buy this truck, this brand new truck that you want, or it's probably more like $80,000 now. These new trucks are crazy. But you said that the interest is the price that you're paying for the money. You're buying money. So you're borrowing $80,000, but then you have to pay $40,000 or whatever it is over the price or the life of that loan that you're buying the $80,000 for. And I was like, oh man, that just makes me sick thinking about I'm going to go buy $80,000 for $120,000.
Well, if you want to take that example to the extreme, in welcome to America, take your house note.
They have to give you the amortization schedule, but they make it complicated to the point where if you take out a $500,000 loan, guess what? You're actually, over the life of the next 30 years, you're paying like $1.1 million.
I know. Yeah. It just makes me sick.
Yeah, it's if you really want to see that in an extreme, get a financial calculator, download, figure out what your house payment is. It's great. We're buying this house. It's our starter home. It's $250,000. We're making our payment. When you're done, it won't be $250,000.
No.
It is going to be way more expensive.
Way more than that.
And and then you look at like especially like the first 5 years, you pay whatever your note is. Oh, you're paying almost pennies in principal.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, that's the other part, right? So you make that $2,000, $3,000 payment, and $10. That first payment, like $10 went to principal.
Yeah.
And you're like going, that, and housing has become that we do have an affordable housing crisis right now, and young folks have a very hard time getting onto the real estate, the socioeconomic ladder that allows you to climb via real estate. And so with that situation, understanding getting that house, you're buying that convenience of, I own this place today, but I am paying for it. And so that $250,000 note, by the time you're done, is $400,000 or $500,000, whatever your interest rate correlates to. You had to go earn that money, pay taxes on the money that you earned, buy food and other things that those are exposed to, and then pay a portion of what is left to service that debt.
Right.
Yeah, that's so in our modern society.
So the just easy math, the $200,000 house, but over the course of the 30-year mortgage, you're going to pay $400,000. So you another way I heard it described was debt or borrowing money is simply making yourself more broke in the future. Is all you're doing. You're borrowing money out of your pocket from the future because you're going to be.
Yeah, you hear all those different things,
Yeah.
But when you buy a house, assuming it appraises, well, you when it's all said and done, you probably just lived rent free for 30 years when you ultimately sell it, and then you add on, you might pay $400,000, but then there's also, I call it a refi fallacy, which is, rates drop and you get to lower your mortgage principal, but if you're not careful, you just start back at the 30. In the last 5 years, you paid almost all the interest and you still have the same amount of principal you did, all those kinds of things. Going back to the question, and this is something that I've actually been thinking about it while we've been talking. Yeah, I think spending is unequivocally more important. I think sometimes we get in trouble with, especially as men, the barometer of our importance is predicated on whatever our paycheck is.
Income.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, income without a purpose is what? I mean, we talked about it last night. Someone making 7 figures a year had a net worth of $300,000. Why?
Yep.
Well, so on paper, you looked at the W-2 or the 1099.
You're like,
rich.
holy crap. Yeah.
Rich.
Right.
In reality, poorer than
broke.
Just about anybody you know. So, I think it actually ties back into our purpose, and we talked about this last night, which is our income and our money generation and whatever we create. If we're not purposeful of it, then what are we actually doing? We're just on a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And also having, and goal is a little bit too simplistic, but what do you want? What is the ultimate goal that you're seeking? Is it to retire at 35? Is it to have a bigger house? Is it to, start a nonprofit? Whatever it's going to be, the income is almost secondary, and it's all but irrelevant if your spending is
Exceeding your income.
Yeah, or if it's not even completely aligned with what your ultimate ultimate goal is here.
Right. Well, I'm reading The Millionaire Next Door right now, and it talks about how there's a misconception on what wealthy means. Like if you ask maybe an average person, like what's it mean to be wealthy? And they're probably going to say something like, oh, well, you're going to have really nice things. You're going to have $1 million house and all these cool cars and watches and all but so back to the goal thing, like what is your goal? Is your goal to have really nice things, or is your goal to actually build wealth? Where you asked me last night, can you write $100,000 check? And I was like, not yet, but I'm working towards that.
Yeah.
And so the average there are cases where if you're making 7 figures, you can probably have the $1 million house and all of these things and have the $1 million in the bank. You can have both at the extreme where you're making 7 figures, but the average person's not going to be making that much money. So you're likely going to have to choose one or the other. Like, you're probably not going to be able to have the millions of dollars worth of stuff and have of the consumer stuff and have the $1 million in the bank on the average person's salary. And so it's like, choose what you want. Like, what do you want in life? Do you want to have the extravagant lifestyle, or do you want to be a good steward with the money and be able to like actually perform when like you want to go pay for something? Can you like actually go write the check, or are you drowning in payments because you're trying to live this lifestyle?
I think it ties back into what we're talking about with humility.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was working in Big Law up in Atlanta, did I have the money to go get a new car? Sure. Did I drive a POS Honda Civic that got 37 miles to gallon and had no AC driving in Atlanta? And I wore gym clothes to work, because if I didn't,
Your suit
my suit would be soaked, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And I wore it as a badge of honor. I was so proud that I was doing it. And then, of course, I bitched about it on the back end. But when oh my God, all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, it goes back to humility.
Uh-huh.
And I have I know we've all seen this, where you're driving somewhere and you look over and it's a trailer. But man, they've got a $75,000 Ford Mustang that they just jacked up, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't matter how much money you're going to make in this life.
Mm-hmm.
If you spend it unwisely and you're not purposeful in what you're doing with it, you're just on a hamster wheel.
You can have anything you want. You just can't have everything you want.
Right.
Yeah. And in the physical fire, we say you can't you can't out-exercise poor eating. Mm-hmm. In the professional fire, you can't out-earn poor spending habits.
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
100%.
I hope you got some value out of this conversation that we had back at the local area director retreat. Be sure to share this podcast with someone you know, and remember to live intentionally.